The Roaring Twenties, what life was really like in the 1920s. Let's turn back the clock 100 years to an extraordinary decade in American history. The 1920s, also known as the Roaring Twenties. This wasn't just a period, it was a whirlwind of change where jazz roared through the streets, flapper fashion shattered old conventions, and revolutionary inventions rapidly transformed daily life. We'll explore what truly made them roaring. The dazzling neon lights and the free-spirited energy, but also unveil the darker sides, the lesser-known secrets, and the underlying social challenges that existed beneath that glamorous facade. So, let's begin our journey into this captivating decade. The shadow of Prohibition and underground culture. The 1920s kicked off with a landmark law that completely altered the American social and cultural landscape. Prohibition. On January 17, 1920, the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution officially took effect, making the manufacture, sale, or transportation of alcoholic beverages illegal nationwide. This was a massive social experiment, a tumultuous 13-year period, enacted with the promise of a more moral, disciplined, and sober America. Proponents believed that eliminating alcohol would reduce crime, improve public health, and bolster societal morals. However, the reality unfolded quite differently. Instead of curbing Americans' free spirit and desire to celebrate, Prohibition only fueled a thirst for life, for fun, and for self-expression. This gave birth to a whole new, vibrant, and mysterious underground culture with secret bars known as speakeasies. Speakeasies weren't just places for illegal drinks, they were cultural hubs where people found escape and joy in a society shackled by law. Imagine a hidden door tucked away behind a dusty old bookstore, or a staircase leading down to a damp cellar beneath a fragrant bakery. Those were the entrances to speakeasies. Or sometimes it was simply an entertainment hotspot, concealed behind an unmarked alley door, making it utterly unsuspected by outsiders. Patrons ordering drinks were often asked to speak easy to avoid drawing attention, staying clear of the ears and eyes of the police and liquor hunters. It was from this simple reminder that the name speakeasy was born, becoming a symbol of rebellion and secrecy. Inside the speakeasies, the atmosphere was always electric and full of life. Seductive saxophone wails, lively piano tunes played non-stop, and the dance floor was always packed with energetic Charleston or Lindy Hop moves. These dances, with their nimble steps and explosive energy, became symbols of the 1920s freedom and exuberance. Speakeasies weren't just bars, they were escapes, havens of joy, and often the most welcoming and vibrant spots in the city. Remarkably, these places were truly incredibly inclusive. All social classes, from the wealthy to the working class, black and white, immigrants and native-born, gathered to savor the feeling of rebellion, the joy of music, and the simple pleasure of drinking with friends. Social boundaries seemed to blur in this bustling and free-spirited environment. Law enforcement of Prohibition was almost a joke. Understaffed police forces, limited resources, and rampant corruption made control impossible. For every one tavern shut down, two more popped up like mushrooms after rain. Bribes flowed as easily as bootleg liquor, from patrol officers to high-ranking officials, creating a widespread system of corruption. Prohibition didn't stop people from drinking, it simply changed where and how they drank. Speakeasies became powerful symbols of the American spirit, resilient, innovative, and refusing to be told how to live. They embodied the public's resistance to a law perceived as interfering too deeply with personal lives. And when Prohibition took effect, it created a massive and extremely lucrative market for criminal gangs. Prohibition was the ultimate cash cow, the driving force behind the unprecedented growth of organized crime. Before Prohibition, gangs operated in gambling, prostitution, drug dealing, and weapons trafficking. However, organized crime had never been as prevalent and powerful as during this period. Some argue that the 1920s marked the birth of modern organized crime in America. Gangs not only smuggled liquor, but also controlled the entire supply chain, from production and transportation to distribution. Among the infamous crime bosses who rose to prominence during the Prohibition era, we must mention George Remus. A clever former lawyer, he created the Circle to acquire legal liquor warehouses before Prohibition took effect. He then sold the alcohol for medicinal purposes through pharmacies, a legal loophole he exploited to its fullest. Remus earned tens of thousands of dollars daily and had thousands of employees working in his bootlegging empire. His cunning and organizational skills made him one of the wealthiest liquor kings. Charles Lucky Luciano, a notorious Italian gangster, the head of the New York Mafia, and considered the father of modern organized crime. He controlled gambling, liquor smuggling, and prostitution. More importantly, Luciano founded the Commission, National Crime Syndicate, in the early 1930s, an executive council composed of major mafia families nationwide, aiming to reduce internal violence and enhance criminal operations efficiency. Al Capone, perhaps the most famous name, the kingpin of Chicago during Prohibition. Capone not only owned thousands of speakeasies but also ran his own breweries, distilleries, and illegal distribution systems. His empire earned tens of millions of dollars annually, making him one of the most powerful and wealthy men in America at the time. Capone was also behind the 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre, a bloody showdown between rival gangs earning him the nickname Public Enemy Number 1. This massacre shocked America, exposing the brutality of organized crime. Gangs built a complex system based on violence and bribery to maintain their operations. Police, witnesses, and even FBI agents were bribed to turn a blind eye or cooperate. The explosion of organized crime and gangster violence, culminating in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, served as a strong wake-up call for the public and the government. Pressure to repeal the 18th Amendment grew steadily. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, with his 1932 campaign advocating for repeal, won a landslide victory. Finally, the 21st Amendment was ratified in December 1933, officially ending Prohibition nationwide, concluding a controversial era with unforeseen consequences. What do you think would have happened if Prohibition had lasted even longer? Share your thoughts in the comments. The automobile revolution, how cars changed America forever. If there's one invention that truly changed the daily lives of Americans in the 1920s, it was the automobile. From a luxury item reserved for the elite, the car quickly became a common commodity, a symbol of freedom and progress. This transformation was largely thanks to revolutionary breakthroughs in manufacturing, particularly Henry Ford's legendary assembly line. This efficient production method significantly reduced manufacturing costs, making the Model T the first affordable car for most average American families. With its accessible price, millions of cars were sold, ushering America into a new era of mobility and exploration. For the first time in history, a working-class family could own their own car. This brought a new and unprecedented sense of freedom. They were no longer bound by rigid train schedules or public streetcar routes. Weekend outings became easier, and the ability to explore places beyond their town's limits opened up an entirely new world. Geographical distances were no longer major barriers, and the scope of personal life expanded significantly. Families could drive to visit relatives in neighboring states, picnic at national parks, or simply cruise along newly constructed roads. The car became a gateway to new experiences and personal adventures. As more and more people owned cars, the entire American landscape began to reshape itself to accommodate this new mode of transportation. Roads, once dusty and rough, primarily designed for horse-drawn carriages, began to be smoothly paved. A national road network rapidly developed, connecting cities and towns across the country. Bridges spanned rivers, tunnels cut through hills, and gas stations sprouted up everywhere, becoming new landmarks on the American map. This infrastructure development not only facilitated travel but also boosted the economy, creating thousands of jobs in construction and service industries. The car was not just a means of transport but also a powerful symbol of independence and personalization. It represented the spirit of the 1920s: freedom, speed, and a forward-looking perspective. You were no longer limited by others' schedules or public transport. You could go wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted. This created a new, faster, and more flexible pace of life, especially in social and recreational activities. young couples could date more freely, escaping family supervision, and long drives became a popular form of entertainment. However, the automobile revolution also brought challenges and demanded perseverance, particularly in rural areas. The road to modernization in the countryside was slower. Many rural roads remained unpaved for years, becoming muddy or dusty depending on the season. Driving on these roads was often a challenging adventure, but the American spirit of perseverance and community shone through. If you got stuck on the road, someone would almost always stop to help, demonstrating solidarity in times of difficulty. Meanwhile, major cities faced their own distinct challenges. Streets once filled with pedestrians, streetcars, and bicycles now became congested with noisy engines and impatient drivers. Traffic jams became a regular nightmare, and the number of traffic accidents increased significantly. To address this chaotic situation, modern traffic concepts began to emerge. Traffic lanes, stop signs, speed limits, and road markings, things we take for granted today, all originated from this tumultuous transition. Urban planners and traffic engineers had to devise new solutions to manage the increasing flow of vehicles. The long-term impact of the automobile on America was profoundly significant. It didn't just change how we moved, but also redefined how we viewed the world and organized society. Small towns along major routes began building motels, restaurants, and gas stations to welcome travelers, creating the road trip tourism industry. Cities began to expand beyond their centers, creating new suburbs where families could live in quieter spaces while still having easy access to city jobs and services. Road trips became a new American tradition, an integral part of family culture. More importantly, the car broadened people's horizons. They started dreaming differently. Because now, the road didn't just lead home. It led to possibilities, to new, unexplored horizons. The automobile truly brought a sense of freedom, exploration, and optimism, a crucial driving force behind the Roaring '20s. The media explosion, when America tuned in, watched on, and dreamed together. The 1920s weren't just roaring because of vibrant jazz clubs and speedy automobiles. This was also an era of an unprecedented media revolution, as radio and cinema took over every household and shaped a truly national mass culture. The age of radio. Before the 1920s, information and entertainment were primarily local. But with the advent of radio, everything changed. From 1923 to 1930, the number of U.S. households owning radios surged astonishingly, reaching 6 out of 10 homes by the end of the decade. This demonstrates the rapid adoption and powerful influence of this new technology. Radio wasn't just an entertainment device, it connected the nation in an unprecedented way. For the first time in history, breaking news from around the world, live music from major concert halls, thrilling baseball games, and even live radio dramas were broadcast into the living rooms of millions of American families from coast to coast. People from all parts of the country, regardless of geographical distance or social class, could share the same moment, the same emotion, at the same time. Radio created a strong sense of community and unity. It became a common heartbeat for the community, spreading throughout families from isolated farms in the Midwest to crowded apartments in New York. People listened together to favorite songs, followed dramatic programs with anticipation, and shared important news, forging a common cultural identity. Radio also quickly created heroes and villains. A prime example is Charles Lindbergh, who became an overnight sensation when radio broadcast his miraculous, non-stop transatlantic flight into American homes. Everyone knew him, not just through newspapers, but also through his voice and live radio commentary, creating a nationwide wave of admiration and inspiration. Entertainment stars like jazz singers and musicians also gained nationwide fame thanks to radio, bringing their music to millions. The golden age of cinema. If radio allowed you to hear the world, then film opened a door for you to escape into another enchanting and glamorous world. The 1920s was the true first golden age of cinema. Movie theaters were no longer simple venues, but transformed into magnificent, splendid palaces, rising in the hearts of major cities. These cinemas were often elaborately decorated, with sparkling chandeliers, plush velvet carpets, and comfortable seating, offering a luxurious experience to audiences. By the mid-1920s, 50 million Americans went to the movies every week, an astonishing number that shows the irresistible appeal of cinema. Going to the movies became an indispensable weekend entertainment habit for many families. Initially, films were silent, meaning they had no dialogue. Audiences followed the story unfolding on the big screen, while a pianist or a small orchestra performed live musical scores to set the mood and underscore emotions. Emotions were powerfully conveyed through the actors' expressive faces and the shimmering black and white images on screen. However, 1927 changed everything. The film The Jazz Singer debuted and introduced talking pictures to most Americans. This was a historical milestone. The moment audiences heard the voice of Al Jolson, the lead actor, they were completely captivated. The spoken word added a new depth to the story, transforming the movie-watching experience from a visual event into a vibrant, multi-sensory one. Movie viewership exploded after the advent of talkies. Film stars became household names and were beloved nationwide. Legends like Rudolph Valentino with his captivating and mysterious allure, Clara Bow with her iconic It Girl persona, Douglas Fairbanks with his daring performances, and Greta Garbo with her cool, elegant beauty shaped a new, glamorous vision of American beauty, appeal, and dreams. They weren't just actors but cultural icons, influencing fashion, lifestyles, and even the thoughts of millions of fans. They were the true Hollywood royalty, living lavish lives and idolized by the public. A national mass culture, radio, and film, when combined, together created something America had never seen before: a truly national mass culture. People were not only entertained, but also united by shared stories, songs, and performances. Radio shows and blockbuster films created common conversation topics, shared interests, and even popular words or phrases that spread nationwide. In a rapidly changing era with significant social and economic shifts, mass media became an anchor, something familiar, something thrilling, and most importantly, something that reminded Americans that even as their world changed, they were in it together. This cultural unification helped shape modern American identity and laid the groundwork for the massive entertainment industry that followed. Do you think mass media like radio and film helped America overcome racial differences? Or did they only make them more apparent? Let us know your thoughts. Urbanization, retail revolution, and the new American way of life. The 1920s wasn't just a period of technological innovation and entertainment. It also witnessed profound changes in population and lifestyle, particularly through intense urbanization. One of the decade's biggest demographic shifts was the steady and massive migration from rural farms to bustling cities. Millions of young people, especially those in their 20s, left behind familiar rural lives in search of better job opportunities, excitement, and a fresh start in major cities like New York, Chicago, Detroit, and Los Angeles. Cities promised things unattainable in the countryside: higher-paying jobs in factories and offices, diverse entertainment options, and a sense of freedom and modernity that village life couldn't offer. To welcome this new wave of residents, cities underwent an incredible transformation. Construction boomed, and city skylines changed almost overnight. Massive steel and concrete towers rose into the sky, creating architectural landmarks symbolizing the era's prosperity and ambition. Cities began to take on the iconic shapes we still recognize today, with skyscrapers, complex transportation systems, and bustling downtown areas. This development wasn't just architectural, it also reflected a change in lifestyle. People lived closer together, relied on urban services, and experienced a faster, more vibrant way of life. Alongside the urban boom, retail culture also underwent a revolution. Small-town general stores, once the heart of every community where people met and exchanged news, now faced fierce competition. Chain stores like Woolworths and A&P began to spring up everywhere, offering more product options and significantly lower prices due to their large scale of business. This was the beginning of the modern consumer economy, where efficiency and price became key factors. In major cities, a new and more luxurious form of retail emerged: the department store. Names like Macy's in New York and Marshall Field's in Chicago became true palaces of commerce. Shopping was no longer just the act of buying things. It had transformed into an entertainment and social experience. These splendid department stores offered everything from clothing and furniture to home appliances, all attractively displayed in vast, luxurious spaces. For the growing middle class, strolling through a department store became a way to pass time, socialize with friends, and enjoy the glamour of modern life. These stores also hosted fashion shows, art exhibits, and even featured luxurious restaurants, turning shopping into a social event. Americans in the 1920s had more leisure time than ever before. Workdays were shortened, wages gradually increased, and weekends became a time for enjoying life and relaxing. Economic prosperity brought the ability to spend on entertainment and travel. With affordable cars, the beach became the ultimate weekend destination for families. Before cars, beach vacations were primarily for the wealthy, who could afford train travel and expensive accommodations. Now, families could easily drive to the coast, making beach trips a popular and accessible leisure activity. The popularity of beaches also brought significant changes in beach fashion and social norms. Swimsuits became shorter, lighter, and more practical, reflecting a shift in notions of beauty and comfort. Tanned skin, once considered a mark of manual labor and lower classes, now became fashionable, even alluring, especially for women. This marked a major departure from the rigid Victorian values of a generation prior, where porcelain white skin was considered a symbol of elegance. Picnics on the sand, lively boardwalks with games and music, and children chasing waves, all were a far cry from previous social conventions. The beach became a space of freedom and relaxation, where people could escape the constraints of daily life. The changing role of women, flappers, and beyond. The 1920s was a pivotal period for American women, marking profound changes in their rights, lifestyles, and roles in society. The decade began with a significant historical milestone: the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920, granting white women the right to vote. While full suffrage for all women in every state, especially women of color, would take decades longer, this was still a monumental step forward, giving women a political voice they had never had before. Additionally, women entered the workforce in increasing numbers and actively participated in the nation's new mass consumer culture, demonstrating growing economic and social independence. The flapper icon. No cultural icon of the 1920s is more recognizable and controversial than the flapper. The flapper wasn't just a fashion style but a lifestyle, representing the rebellious and free spirit of the era. They were young women with short, sassy bob haircuts, cigarettes dangling from bright red lips, and dancing tirelessly to lively jazz bands. Their fashion also broke all traditional rules: dresses short above the knee, sheer stockings, and even rolled down below the knee. Corsets were abandoned, a symbol of Victorian restraint and formality, replaced by looser garments with more natural lines, emphasizing youth and dynamism. This change was not just about fashion, but a powerful statement of liberation from physical and social constraints. Flappers were known for their quick wit, fast talk, daring attitude, and being uninhibited by previous social conventions or taboos. They smoked cigarettes publicly, drank illegal alcohol at speakeasies, drove their own cars, and flirted with multiple men without fear of judgment. They especially loved the Charleston, a 1920s dance craze of African-American origin, with its nimble steps and explosive energy, reflecting their free spirit. Flappers represented a new generation of women who dared to live on their own terms, challenging old moral standards and embracing life to the fullest. Women in the workforce. Although the flapper image was very prominent, the reality of women's roles in the workforce was more complex. While the number of working women increased, the majority still held traditional women's roles, often undervalued and poorly paid. Nearly a third of working women in the 1920s were domestic servants, a labor-intensive and often exploited occupation. Others were office workers, factory laborers, store clerks, and other feminized professions like teachers and nurses. Workplace discrimination and wage inequality remained rampant. Women were often paid significantly less than men for the same work. The average weekly wage for men in 1927 was $29.35, while for women it was only $17.34, revealing a large disparity and injustice in the economic system. However, World War I opened up new opportunities for women, especially black women. As European immigration was cut off by the war, black women found a foothold in industry by accepting lower wages and replacing male labor who had gone to war. After the war, many women transitioned to sales jobs in burgeoning department stores or clerical and secretarial work in offices, jobs requiring administrative and communication skills. These jobs, though still low-paying, offered economic independence and an escape from strenuous manual labor. Impact on marriage and sexuality. The nature of marriage also began to change in the 1920s, moving towards more companionship between spouses, rather than solely an economic or social contract. Young couples began to seek romance, love, and mutual understanding in their relationships. Birth control became increasingly popular, giving women the freedom to explore their sexuality without facing the consequences of unintended pregnancies. The availability of contraception gave women greater autonomy over their bodies and lives, influencing even premarital relationships. However, this freedom had limits. Marriage remained the ultimate and most important goal for most women in society at the time. Fear of reputation and social judgment still concerned flappers, and they still had to balance personal freedom with existing social norms. Despite significant progress, society still had many constraints on women. The decline of the flapper image. The stock market crash in October 1929 marked an abrupt end to the Roaring Twenties. As the Great Depression began, the decade's optimistic and exuberant spirit faded. Hollywood and mass media also no longer focused on the flapper image, as it no longer suited the difficult economic climate. In the 1930s, women's fashion returned to a more traditional, modest style, reflecting a shift in societal mindset from prosperity to caution and frugality. Nevertheless, the changes flappers brought regarding women's freedom and individual expression left a profound mark, paving the way for future feminist movements. Racial tensions, the Great Migration, and the rise of the Harlem Renaissance. While the 1920s are remembered for their glamour and prosperity for many, this was also a decade rife with racial tensions and inequality. However, from within these very challenges, an extraordinary cultural and intellectual movement emerged, the Harlem Renaissance. The Great Migration, one of the most significant demographic events in American history with a profound impact on the 1920s, was the Great Migration. From approximately 1916 to 1970, over 6 million African Americans moved from the rural South to cities in the North, Midwest, and West. They were driven by a combination of push and pull factors. They were pushed from their homes by severe lack of economic opportunity in the Southern agricultural economy and the oppression of harsh segregation laws known as Jim Crow. Jim Crow laws imposed discrimination and racial segregation in every aspect of life, from education and public transportation to housing and employment. At the same time, World War I created a great demand for industrial labor in the industrialized urban areas of the North, Midwest, and West. The flow of European immigrants was cut off by the war, creating a labor void that needed to be filled. Wages in the North were often 3 times higher than in the South, creating a strong incentive for African Americans to seek a better life. They longed to escape poverty and violence, seeking a promised land in the developing industrial cities. However, despite escaping some overt violence and blatant discrimination of Jim Crow laws, African Americans still faced social and legal systems designed to segregate them from white neighborhoods in the North. Housing tensions were a major issue as black people were forced into crowded and underserved ghettos. Racism and prejudice remained widespread in the North, evidenced by discrimination in employment, education, and public services. In the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan, KKK, a white supremacist terrorist group, grew stronger and spread across the country. The KKK marketed itself as a law enforcement organization that could do what the government couldn't, stopping Catholic immigrants who were allegedly violating Prohibition. The KKK raided Catholic immigrant homes, burned their businesses, and planted evidence to use against them. The KKK's goal wasn't to jail these individuals, but to terrorize these communities. The Harlem Renaissance. Amidst these social tensions and racial discrimination, a cultural beacon ignited in Harlem, a neighborhood in New York. New York developed into a vibrant cultural hub for African American artists, musicians, singers, and authors in what became known as the Harlem Renaissance. By the 1920s, Harlem had become the most renowned African American community in the world. The concentration of Black people in Harlem created a dynamic scene where self-discovery, cultural awareness, and political activism flourished. It was a safe and encouraging space for creativity, where Black artists could freely express themselves and explore their identity without censorship or discrimination as in other places. This place nurtured an unprecedented artistic blossoming, encompassing literature, painting, music, film, poetry, and jazz. Prominent figures from this period became legends in American cultural history. Writers like Langston Hughes with his powerful poems about the Black experience, and Zora Neale Hurston with her stories about life in the American South. Visual artists like Jacob Lawrence and Romar Bearden with works exploring Black history and culture. Great musicians like Bessie Smith, the Empress of the Blues, and Duke Ellington, one of the most influential jazz musicians of all time. And social activists like Marcus Garvey, who advocated for the Back to Africa movement, and A. Philip Randolph, who championed labor and civil rights. This Harlem Renaissance community redefined the Black experience in the United States, fostering a new sense of pride in their cultural identity and serving as a powerful voice for the desire for equality and justice in American society. It was a testament to the power of art and culture in resisting oppression and building a better future. Do you think a cultural explosion like the Harlem Renaissance could have happened anywhere else besides major northern cities at that time? The economic boom and the Roaring Twenties, sudden halt. The 1920s, or the Roaring Twenties, weren't just shaped by social and cultural changes, but also by an unprecedented economic boom. This was a period of widespread economic growth and prosperity, fueled by a strong recovery after World War I and deferred consumer demand following the war. The American economy successfully transitioned from wartime to peacetime, bursting forth with new vigor and playing a crucial role in providing loans for Europe's economic boom, contributing to global recovery. The U.S. became the richest nation in the world per capita and had the largest overall GDP. Industries based on mass production thrived, and society rapidly adapted to consumerism. Factories mass-produced goods at low costs, and consumers eagerly bought new conveniences. Many new products became staples in American households, completely transforming daily life. Convenient ready-made textiles, cosmetics empowering women to express individuality, radios bringing entertainment and information to every home, and electrical appliances like vacuum cleaners and refrigerators revolutionized housework. Even fresh orange juice year-round was a novelty and a luxury at the time, indicating an increase in comfort and lifestyle. Companies fully leveraged new media like film and radio to advertise their goods. Advertising became innovative and pervasive, helping to sell more products to more people. This created a strong consumer culture. In particular, the concept of buy now, pay later installment credit allowed many to purchase luxury items they couldn't immediately afford, from cars and home appliances to radios. This credit system strongly boosted purchasing activity, creating a false sense of prosperity and encouraging many to spend beyond their means. However, this wealth and prosperity were not enjoyed by everyone. There was a significant downside to the prosperity that is often overlooked. The Republican-led federal government adopted a hands-off, laissez-faire approach to the economy, meaning businesses were not strictly regulated. This policy allowed businesses to operate with virtually no oversight, which made the rich even richer but offered little protection for workers or the poor. The wealth gap grew increasingly wide, specifically African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, and recent immigrants, faced significant economic barriers, marginalized from the boom, and enduring discrimination in work and life. They were often paid less and had fewer opportunities for advancement. The economy also expanded partly because people borrowed to invest, and many Americans began investing in the stock market, hoping to get rich quick. The stock market became a craze, attracting even those without investment experience. Stock prices soared, exceeding sustainable levels and not reflecting the true value of companies. This was a bubble waiting to burst. People borrowed money to buy stocks, and as stock prices rose, they borrowed more to buy even more, creating a dangerous cycle of speculation. By the end of the decade, 1929, everything changed abruptly and grimly. The music faded, the laughter quieted. The Wall Street stock market crash on October 29, 1929, also known as Black Tuesday, mercilessly ended this dazzling era. This event wiped out billions of dollars in wealth, leaving millions of investors destitute. It wasn't just a market crash, but the beginning of the Great Depression, bringing years of hardship, unemployment, and poverty worldwide. The 1920s, with all its exuberance and optimism, ended painfully, giving way to a new era full of challenges. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey through the past. If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into history, remember to hit like, share with your friends, and especially subscribe to the Back to Yesterday channel so you don't miss our next historical adventures. We have many more fascinating stories waiting to be explored. See you in the next video.